She was buried alive in the scorching Arizona desert, left for dead by bandits who thought the sun would erase their crime. For 3 days, Clara Winslow lay there, sand filling her mouth, buzzards circling overhead, the heat burning her skin raw. Most people would have given up. Most people would have closed their eyes and let death take them. But Clara wasn't most people. She survived on nothing but pure spite. And when a lonely cowboy named Luke Maddox rode toward those circling buzzards instead of away from them, he found something he never expected. A woman who refused to die, and a second chance at love neither of them believed they deserved. But survival was just the beginning. Because sometimes the people who try to destroy you come back to finish the job. Your darkest moment doesn't have to be your ending. It can be your beginning. Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about choosing to rebuild when everything falls apart. The value. This story reminds us that we are far stronger than we know, and that love can find us even in the most unexpected places, if we're brave enough to let it in. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Your support means the world to this channel. Now let's begin. The heat in that part of the state is a mean old dog. It shows up before the sun and never leaves. By sunrise, the air was already waving like a mirage over the dusty ground. Luke Maddox had been out since dawn, checking the fences on the Barbed Cross Ranch. His horse, Dancer, knew the drill, stepping carefully around cactus and coiled rattlers. Luke was the trail boss, a hard job that made a man old before his time, and he liked it that way. Hard work kept a man's mind from wandering to places it ought not to go. He spotted the buzzards just before noon, maybe a half dozen of them, making lazy circles in the sky. Every cowboy knows that sign. Something down below was either dying or already dead. Most times it was a stray calf or a horse with a busted leg. A wise man would have tipped his hat and kept on riding. Losing one animal was just part of ranching. But Luke never did claim to be the wisest man, just a stubborn one. He nudged Dancer toward the birds. The first thing that hit him was the smell. Dancer flattened his ears and fought the reins, wanting no part of it. Luke calmed him, his hand resting near the rifle in its scabbard. As he got closer, the big birds flapped off, complaining loudly. Luke looked down, and his blood ran cold. It wasn't a steer, it wasn't a horse. It was a woman. She was lying in a shallow wash, half covered with sand and gravel like a poor attempt at a burial. The Texas wind had uncovered an arm and part of her face. The tatters of her dress looked like they were once a pretty shade of blue. Luke was on his knees beside her before he even thought about it. He reached for her wrist, expecting to find it cold and still. After 3 days in this heat, there was no chance. But then he felt it, faint and fluttery. But it was there, a pulse. "Well, I'll be," Luke whispered. He started digging her out with his bare hands, sand flying everywhere. "Ma'am? Can you hear me, ma'am?" Nothing. When her face was clear, he had to look away for a second. It was burned raw and swollen, something awful. Her lips were cracked and bloody, but she was breathing. Little tiny breaths, but she was alive. Luke had seen what the sun can do to a man. This woman should have been gone. But something inside her just wouldn't quit. "All right now," he said, his own voice shaky. "I got you. You're going to be all right." It was a lie, and he knew it. But some lies are worth telling. He took out his canteen, soaked his bandana, and gently dabbed water on her busted lips. A little trickled into her mouth, and she swallowed. "That's it," Luke coaxed her. "Just a little more." He gave her all he dared. She was light as a feather when he lifted her, like she hadn't had a square meal in weeks. Her dress was fine silk, the kind you'd see back east. Her hands were soft, no calluses. This was no rancher's wife. He saw a pale line on her ring finger where a wedding band used to be. No hat, no boots, Nothing. He carefully draped her over Dancer's saddle. The old horse stood rock steady, like he knew this was serious business. Luke climbed up behind her, holding her close. The nearest shelter was a line shack 3 miles north. The main ranch house was a good 15 miles west. It wasn't a choice. 15 miles would surely kill her. 3 was a long shot, but it was the only one they had. The line shack was just a one-room adobe hut with a fireplace and a cot. It wasn't much, but it was cover from the sun, and right now that was everything. He kicked the door open and laid her on the cot as gently as he could. Her breathing was getting rougher, each breath a painful rasp. "You just hang on," he told her, not knowing if she could hear a word. "You fought this long, don't you dare give up now." Luke knew a thing or two about doctrine on the trail. He'd set bones and stitched up gashes, but he'd never seen a sun beating this bad. He started slow, dripping cool water onto her lips every few minutes. When she swallowed, he felt a flicker of hope. He soaked clean rags in water and laid them on her face and arms. Her skin was so hot it felt like it might burn his hands right through the cloth. He kept at it for more than an hour, changing the cloths and whispering words of encouragement. Outside, the sun finally started to give up for the day. Inside the little shack, her breathing slowly started to even out. Luke sat back, exhausted, and looked at her swollen face. The fever seemed to be breaking. Her pulse felt a little stronger. "Who in the world are you?" he wondered out loud. "And who would do this to somebody?" Just then she woke up screaming. The sound ripped through the quiet shack. Luke was on his feet in a heartbeat, his hands up. "Easy now, easy, you're safe." But she was fighting the blanket, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with him. Her eyes were wild, seeing horrors that were not there. "The stage," she gasped, her voice a painful rasp. "They're coming back." "Nobody's coming," Luke said, his grip firm but steady on her shoulders. "You're safe now. You're in a line shack on the Barbed Cross Ranch." She fought him for another moment before collapsing onto the cot, trembling hard. Tears cut clean paths through the grime on her face. "Water," she whispered. He held the canteen to her lips but pulled it away after a few swallows. "Easy now. Too much will just make you sick." Her swollen eyes finally focused on him. "Who are you?" "Name's Luke Maddox. I'm the trail boss. I found you about 7 hours ago, half buried in the sand." He gave her some space. "What should I call you, ma'am?" She stared at him for a long time, as if trying to figure out if he was real. "Clara," she finally managed. "Clara Winslow." "Is that Miss or Mrs.? "Miss," she said, and the word sounded bitter. Luke nodded, noticing the pale, faded line on her ring finger. "Well, Miss Winslow, do you feel up to telling me what happened?" Her face twisted in pain. She fought back the tears and took a steadying breath. "I was on the Tucson stage," she began, her voice still haunted. "I think it was 3 days ago. We were headed for Red Creek." She told him there were 5 passengers, an older couple, a mining engineer, a whiskey salesman, and her. 3 men on horseback ambushed us, she said, her hands twisting the rough blanket. They wore bandanas. They shot the horses and the coach rolled. The salesman was killed in the crash. The bandits pulled the survivors from the wreckage. They took everything: money, jewelry, all their papers. Mr. Garrett tried to fight them, and they pistol-whipped him. When they came for me, She touched the small chain at her throat. "This was my mother's locket. It's all I have left of her. I refused." "And they hit you," Luke finished grimly. "I remember falling. After that, it's all a blur. I just remember them arguing about what to do with us. One of them said the desert should take care of us," she said, and a new kind of darkness filled her eyes. "He said it would hide the evidence." Luke's jaw tightened. "When I woke up, I was buried in sand clear up to my neck. The sun was rising and I could hear the buzzards circling. A shudder ran through her. I just laid there waiting to die." "But you didn't," he said quietly. "No," she whispered. "I guess not." He looked at her then. At the steel core, he could see underneath all the bruises and pain. You must have prayed awful hard. A dry, cracking sound that might have been a laugh escaped her. I quit praying a long time ago, Mr. Maddox. The only thing that got me through was spite. A small smile touched Luke's lips. Well, spite has kept a lot of folks going when prayer gave out. I won't argue with results. Why did you stop for me? She asked, her gaze steady. Most men would have seen the birds and just kept on riding. The real reason was tied to ghosts he preferred to keep buried. He just gave her the simple part of the truth. It didn't feel right to leave it to chance. Lucky for me, she murmured, her eyes already closing as exhaustion won its fight. Luke, he said gently. Just Luke. He watched her sleep for a moment before stepping outside into the cool night. A lone coyote called out in the vast darkness. He thought about her lasting 3 whole days out there, running on nothing but pure grit. He had known strong men who would have broken under less. He wondered what kind of woman just plain refused to die. By morning, the fever had roared back to life. Luke woke to hear her thrashing and crying out. He spent the morning by her side with cool cloths and quiet words, doing what he could to gentle her through the delirium. She couldn't hear him, lost in the fever. The sand, she choked out. It's in my mouth. I can't breathe. Luke held her hand tight. You can breathe. You're breathing right now. Her fingers would spasm, gripping his and then letting go. He'd tell her, Clara, you're safe. The sand is gone. But her mind was miles away, fighting a battle he couldn't see. He just did what he could. He kept a cool cloth on her head and made sure she drank water. He held her steady when the shaking fits came. By midday, her skin was burning hot. By sundown, she felt so quiet, he had to check her pulse just to know she was still with him. Then, around midnight on the second day, the fever finally broke. Luke was asleep in his chair when her hand touched his arm. He woke with a start. She was looking right at him, her eyes clear for the first time. You're still here, she whispered. Where else would I be, he asked. Anywhere but here, watching some stranger die. You're not dying, Luke said, reaching for the water. And we're not strangers anymore. Here, just take small sips. She managed to drink half the canteen this time. Her movements were weak, but they were her own. How long, she asked. This is the 3rd day since I found you. Maybe the 5th or 6th since the robbery. Clara closed her eyes. It feels like a lifetime. I'm sure it does, Luke replied, studying her, the swelling until her face was going down. He could see now she might have been pretty before the desert got a hold of her. Her eyes were hazel, a mix of green and brown. Her hair, caked with dirt, was probably a light brown or blonde. What happens now, she asked. You get your strength back. Then I'll take you to the main ranch house. The Harpers will know what to do. There's a doctor in Red Creek about 20 miles from here. He can check you over properly. Red Creek? She gave a tired, bitter laugh. That's where I was headed. They hired me to teach school. She touched her bruised face. I had letters, my papers, everything I needed for a new life. Now I have nothing, no money, no proof of who I am. Just the clothes I'm wearing. We'll sort it out, Luke said, trying to sound sure of it. Will we? Clara looked straight at him. You don't know me. I could be lying. Maybe I was one of the bandits and they just left me behind. Were you? He asked simply. No. Then that's settled, Luke said, standing up to stretch. His muscles ached from sitting so long. I'm going to warm up some broth for you. Nothing solid yet, but you need something besides water. He went to the fireplace and stirred the coals, putting a small pot onto heat. He heard her try to shift in the bed behind him. Luke, she said. Yeah? Why aren't you worried I'm making it all up? He thought about it while he stirred the simple beef broth. He'd met plenty of liars in his day, folks who'd smile right at you while looking for a way to get ahead. But Clara didn't feel like that, not even broken and scared. "I've had to learn to read people to get by out here," he said at last. "You learn to trust your gut feeling, or you don't make it. My gut says you're telling the truth. Your gut could be wrong." "It could be," he admitted, "but I don't think so." The broth was warm now. He poured some into a cup and helped her sit up to drink it. She drank it all, slow and careful. "See," he said. "That's a start." Clara gave him the cup back but kept watching him. "You read?" She nodded toward the small bookshelf against the wall. It held a few of his favorites, Dickens, Whitman, Shakespeare. "Most cowboys I've met can barely write their own name." "Well, most cowboys think reading is a waste of good daylight," Luke said. "Maybe they're right, but I've always liked stories." "What's your favorite?" He couldn't remember the last time someone asked him that. "Depends on what I'm in the mood for. Sometimes I want an adventure. Other times I want something that makes the desert feel a little less empty. Whitman is good for that." "I celebrate myself and sing myself," Clara quoted softly. "And what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you." A feeling he couldn't name shifted inside Luke's chest. "You know Whitman." "I taught literature back in Boston for 3 years," she said. She stopped and he saw her swallow hard. "Before I had to leave." He wanted to ask her why. He wanted to know what would make a teacher leave a city like Boston for a dusty, unknown town in Arizona. But the look in her eyes told him that was a story for another time. Maybe never. So he just said, "Get some more rest. We can talk about books later." Her eyes were already closing. "Promise?" "Promise." This time her sleep looked peaceful. The next few days fell into a routine. Luke would wake up, check on Clara, and do his chores. He'd come back in the morning and she would be awake, eating a little more each day. They talked, but not about the robbery. They talked about books and about the desert, about the little things you build a friendship on. They talked about how the desert only looks dead if you don't know where to look for life. On the 4th day, she stood up by herself. On the 5th, she walked to the table. On the 6th day, he helped her outside to sit in the shade. The sun brought some color back to her cheeks, and she smiled for the first time. "It's beautiful out here," she said, looking at the mountains in the distance. "Most people don't see it that way," Luke said, fixing a piece of leather. "They just see an empty wasteland." Clara tilted her face to the sun. Her burns were healing, and her clean hair was a honey blonde. She looked younger than he first thought, maybe 25 or 26. "How old are you?" he asked before he could stop himself. She opened an eye. "27. You?" "32. "You seem older," she said. "So do you," he answered. They both knew what that meant. They had both lived hard lives. "Luke," Clara's voice turned serious. "What happens when I can travel?" He had been thinking about nothing else. "I'll take you to the Harpers. They'll get you to Red Creek, and you can talk to the sheriff. Maybe that teaching job is still there for you." "And if it's not?" "Then we make a plan B," Luke said, pulling his stitch tight. "There's always a plan B." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I can't go back to Boston," she said, her voice tight. "Even if I wanted to, I can't. I came out here to start over, to be someone else. And now I don't even have that." "You have your life," Luke said gently. "That's not nothing." Tears started to run down her cheeks. "I have no proof of who I am. No money. I'm alive, but for what? To be someone's charity case?" Luke put down his work and knelt in front of her. He didn't touch her, but he met her eyes. "Listen to me, Clara." "Now you listen to me, Clara Winslow," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "You survived 3 days in that sand because you were too damn stubborn to let those men have the last word. You fought fever and pain, and you are still drawing breath. That is not nothing." He leaned closer. "I've seen men face down grizzly bears who didn't have half your grit. You are the strongest person I have ever met, so don't you ever say that about yourself again." She stared at him, her eyes wide and her breath coming fast. In the silence, something fragile and new began to form between them. Her hand came up and her fingers lightly brushed his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. The simple touch felt like a lightning strike. Luke stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his stool. "I need to check a fence line." He fled to the corral, his hands shaking as he saddled his horse. What in the hell was wrong with him? She was a woman in trouble, that's all. But a part of him knew it was already too late for that. That night, they ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread. The silence between them had become comfortable. "Luke," Clara asked softly, "why do you stay out here by yourself?" He kept his eyes on his plate for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "I had a wife once. Her name was Sarah." He paused, his jaw working. "We were young. We had a little place up in Colorado. We were going to have a whole mess of kids." His voice cracked. "She died having our first baby. A little girl. We lost them both." "Oh, Luke," was all she could manage to say. "After that, I just couldn't stay there. I sold everything and just started moving. I ended up here." He finally met her gaze. "I'm good at being alone. It's safer when you don't need anybody." Clara's heart ached for him. "That's not living, Luke. That's just surviving." "Maybe so," he said quietly. "But surviving is all I know how to do anymore," and held his hand. He tensed up, but let her. "I understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's why I left Boston. It wasn't a death, but a scandal that just about buried me. The principal I was seeing swore he'd leave his wife for me." Her voice turned hard as stone. "Turns out he was better at keeping promises to her. When the whole thing blew up, I was the tramp, the homewrecker. It didn't matter that he chased me, that I believed his lies. I was the one who had to pack my bags and run. He kept his job, his family, his whole perfect life." Luke's hand finally squeezed hers. "That ain't right." "No, but that's the world. So I came out here to start fresh, where nobody knew my name. Then those bandits took even that from me." They sat there for a long time, two broken people in a dusty shack. "What if we stopped just getting by?" Clara finally asked. "What if we tried to really live again?" Luke looked at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It might have been hope. "I don't know how," he said honestly. "Neither do I," she admitted. "But maybe we could figure it out together." The air felt thick with what was unsaid. His thumb brushed against her palm, a simple touch that sent a jolt of warmth straight through her. Then, quick as a flash, he pulled his hand back and stood up. "You need to rest." He moved to his bedroll on the other side of the fire, putting a safe distance between them. She understood, but it still stung. "Good night, Luke." "Night, Clara." Neither of them got much sleep. 7 days later, everything changed. Luke had ridden out at dawn for supplies. Hours later, Clara heard horses and her heart leaped, thinking it was him. It wasn't. 3 hard-looking men were parked in front of the shack, their eyes cold as a winter creek. The leader, a tall man with a scar cleaving his face, swung down from his horse. "Well, look what we have here," he drawled, that gravelly voice crawling right up her spine. "Looks like the desert didn't finish you off after all." Her blood ran cold. She knew that voice from her nightmares. "You," she breathed. The scarred man showed a row of stained teeth. "Surprised? Don't be. We always clean up our messes." He nodded to his men. "Boys, check inside. See what she's got." Clara stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. "Luke will be back any second," she bluffed, hating the tremble in her voice. "He's the trail boss, and he's armed." "Is that so?" Scarface pulled his pistol, checking it with a practiced hand. "Then I reckon we'll make this quick. No witnesses this time." He raised the gun. Clara squeezed her eyes shut. but the shot never came. Instead, she heard a voice, colder than death itself. "Drop it!" Her eyes flew open. 50 yards out, Luke sat on his horse, Dancer, with his Winchester rifle already aimed. The 3 bandits froze solid. "I said drop it," Luke repeated, his voice flat. "Twitch wrong and I'll put a bullet through your head before you can blink." Scarface lowered his gun, but he didn't drop it. 4 against 1, friend. Those ain't good odds." 3 against 1, Luke corrected him. "And I was a sharpshooter in the Army. I can put 5 rounds through a playing card at 100 yards. You're a sight bigger than a card, and a heck of a lot closer." For a long second, nobody breathed. The only sound was the thumping of Clara's own heart. The air felt tight enough to snap. Then one of the bandits went for his gun. Luke's Winchester roared once. The man hit the ground, screaming and grabbing his shoulder as his pistol landed in the dust. "The next one will break bone," Luke said, already working the lever on his rifle. "Your call." The man called Scarface dropped his gun. His partners did the same. "Clara, get in the shack," Luke said, his eyes never leaving the outlaws, "and stay down." She hurried inside but watched from the doorway. Luke swung down from his horse, his rifle steady on the 3 men. "On your knees, hands on your head. You twitch, you die." They did as they were told, even the man with the wounded shoulder, his face pale from the pain. Luke walked over, kicked their guns away, and stepped back. "You made a bad mistake coming here." "We were just passing through," Scarface stammered. "Be quiet." Luke's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You came to silence a witness. Maybe me too. That doesn't just make you robbers. It makes you fools. And fools have a habit of finding a rope around their necks." "You ain't got no proof," one of them growled. "I have Clara's word. I've got you threatening her right here on Barbed Cross land, and I'd bet the local sheriff has been itching to find the men who hit that stagecoach." A grim smile touched Luke's face. Looks like his lucky day. The sound of more riders approaching made everyone look up. 6 horsemen appeared over the rise. They were ranch hands from the Barbed Cross, led by a silver-haired man who carried himself like a lawman. "Luke, we heard a shot," the older man called out. His eyes took in the scene and his face hardened. "Well now." "What's all this?" "Stage robbers, Mr. Harper," Luke answered. "Came back to clean up their loose ends. They got sloppy." Thomas Harper, the owner of the Barbed Cross Ranch, sized up the situation with an expert eye. "Tie 'em up, boys. We're taking these fellas to Red Creek. The sheriff will be real interested in talking to them." As the hands secured the prisoners, Harper walked toward Clara, who had stepped out of the shack on unsteady legs. He tipped his hat, his expression kind. "Ma'am, I'm Thomas Harper. This is my ranch. Luke told me about your ordeal. I'm sorry for your troubles, and even sorrier they followed you here." "Thank you, Mr. Harper," Clara said, her voice shaky. "Your trail boss has saved my life twice now." Harper glanced at Luke with a knowing look. Luke's got a knack for that, saving things that other folks might have given up on. He looked back at Clara. "My wife, Eleanor, is up at the main house. It is about an hour's ride from here. She'll want to get you settled in, find you some clothes that fit better than Luke's hand-me-downs. We can ride there now if you're up to it. These men are heading straight to a jail cell in Red Creek." Clara looked over at Luke, and he gave her a small nod. "You'll be safer there. Mrs. Harper will see you're taken care of." "What about you?" she asked. "I'll ride along with the prisoners. Make sure they get delivered." Their eyes met for a long moment. "I'll be back," he said. "We need to talk." "Yes," Clara whispered. "We do." An hour later, Clara was riding a gentle mare toward the main ranch, the little shack shrinking behind her. Luke was headed east with the prisoners and the ranch hands. He didn't look back, but Clara did. She watched until the man who saved her was just a memory on the horizon. Eleanor Harper, riding beside her, smiled softly. She'd seen that same look in her own reflection 30 years ago, after a rugged Texas Ranger had pulled her from a wrecked stagecoach. Some rescues, she knew, went in both directions. The Harper Ranch house was a welcome sight, a 2-story home of white adobe and dark wood. It looked strong and permanent, a true home built to last. This was no rough frontier cabin. It was a testament to years of hard work and success. Eleanor Harper was a woman in her early 50s with kind but sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was tied back neatly. Her hands, though weathered by work, were gentle as she helped Clara dismount. "Come on inside, dear. You look about ready to fall over." Eleanor's voice had a soft Georgia drawl smoothed by decades in Texas. "I had Maria draw you a bath, and I laid out some clothes that ought to fit for now." The hot bath felt like a miracle. Clara soaked away weeks of dirt and fear in the warm, scented water. Afterwards, she found a simple cotton dress in a pale green, a brush, and soft towels waiting for her. When she finally came out, Eleanor was waiting in a bright sitting room with a tray of tea and cakes. "Sit down," Eleanor urged, already pouring her a cup. "You need some food in you." "Luke said you've been living on little more than broth and willpower." Clara took the delicate cup, her own hands feeling rough by comparison. "Luke has been very good to me. From what Thomas tells me, Luke is completely taken with you," Eleanor said with a sparkle in her eye. "Don't look so surprised. My husband might seem gruff, but he pays attention. He said he has never seen Luke work so hard to keep someone safe. Not since, well, that is Luke's story to tell. He told me about his wife," Clara said softly, "about Sarah and their child." Eleanor's smile softened. "He did? That is more than he has shared with anyone in 3 years. She looked at Clara over her teacup. "You must be quite a woman." "I was just someone he found in the desert. That is all." "Is it now?" Eleanor set her cup down. "Clara, I have lived out here for 30 years. I have seen men rescue women from all sorts of trouble. It is always dramatic and noble, but most times the story ends right there. Luke did not just rescue you. He stayed. He nursed you, fed you, and talked to you." She leaned in a little closer. "That is not a rescue, dear. That is care. There is a whole world of difference between the two." Before Clara could think of a reply, the sound of returning horses filled the yard. She saw Luke swing down from his horse, looking tired but relieved as Thomas clapped him on the back. "They'll want to get the whole story," Eleanor said as she stood. "Thomas does not play games when it comes to the safety of this ranch. You should be there, Clara. This is your story as much as anyone's." The men gathered in Thomas Harper's study. Luke, Thomas, and 2 senior ranch hands named Cal and Jim were there. Clara sat in a leather chair while Eleanor stood near her, a quiet source of strength. Thomas spoke first. "The prisoners are in the Red Creek jail. Sheriff Monroe is holding them for the circuit judge, who should be here in about 2 weeks. He'll need official statements from both of you. He wants every detail." He looked directly at Clara. "Are you prepared for that, Miss Winslow?" "Yes," Clara said, her voice firm. "I want them to pay for what they did." "Speaking of that," Luke added, "did the sheriff hear anything about the other folks on the stage?" Thomas nodded. 2 others survived, an older couple named Madison. They made it to town with only minor injuries. The mining engineer and the drummer were killed in the attack. The Madisons filed a report, but with no one to identify the robbers, the trail went cold. He looked at Clara. "Until you." "They'll hang for it," Cal said from his corner. He was an older man with a face weathered by the sun and hard times. 3 counts of murder, attempted murder, and robbery. The judge won't see any other way. Clara felt a strange sense of relief. She felt a knot in her stomach. She wanted justice, but the thought of 3 men hanging because of her word was a heavy burden. Luke must have seen the worry on her face. "Clara, they made their choice," he said gently. "You're just telling the truth. What happens next is on them, not you." "Luke's right," Thomas, the ranch owner, added. "These men are predators. If we let them go, they'll just hurt someone else. You're not the one condemning them. Their own actions did that." Clara nodded, knowing they were right. "When does the sheriff need us?" "Tomorrow, if you feel up to it," Thomas said, then looked at Luke. "I want you to take her. You're our best shot, and I want her protected." Luke gave a short nod. "Understood." After the others left, Luke stood by the window, staring out at the endless land, his shoulders tight. You don't have to be my bodyguard, Clara said softly. I'm sure Mr. Harper has other men. He turned to face her. This has nothing to do with Harper's orders. The fire in his eyes stole her breath. It's because the thought of anyone hurting you again makes me want to punch a hole through a wall. Luke, she started, I know this is too fast. You have your own life to put back together, and I'm a cowboy, he cut in, frustrated. I live in a shack, and I got nothing to offer a woman like you. She closed the distance between them in 3 steps. Don't you dare tell me what I need, she said, her voice fierce. Back in Boston, they told me I deserved to be shamed. Those bandits figured I deserved to die in the sand. But you treated me like I deserved to be cared for. Her trembling hand found his. So don't you tell me I deserve better than the man who saved my life. He just stared at her, his throat working. Slowly, he lifted his other hand and cupped her face, his thumb gently tracing her cheek. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. How to let somebody get close again, Clara admitted. Neither of us knows how. But maybe we can learn it together one day at a time. He moved a little closer, his eyes asking for a sign that she felt the same way. Clara's heart was beating like a drum. The whole moment felt both terrifying and wonderful. The study door swung open. Luke, I need you to... Oh. Eleanor stood right there, looking both amused and sorry. I see I am interrupting. They jumped apart like a couple of kids caught stealing cookies. Clara's face went hot and Luke started studying the floorboards like they held all the secrets of the world. Dinner is in 1 hour, Eleanor said, a smile playing on her lips. I just thought you both should know. She closed the door, but not before Clara saw her knowing grin. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Well, Luke finally said, that was embarrassing. I was thinking more like bad timing, but embarrassing works too. He rubbed the back of his neck, a sure sign he was flustered. We should probably. Yes, probably. But neither one of them moved an inch. Then Luke let out a real laugh, the kind that lit up his whole face. Clara started laughing too, and just like that, the tension broke like a fever. Tomorrow, he said, still smiling, we will ride to Red Creek and give our statements. Then we will just see what comes next. A gentle voice. He looked right at Clara. You made it through something that would have finished most folks. That takes a special kind of grit. The frontier needs people like you, people who just refuse to break. Clara felt her eyes well up. Thank you, Mr. Harper. That means the world to me. After dinner, Eleanor led Clara to a guest room upstairs. It was a beautiful room with a bed that looked softer than a cloud. Sleep well, dear, Eleanor said from the doorway. Tomorrow is going to be a hard day bringing up all those bad memories. But you are not going through it by yourself. We are all here for you. Mrs. Harper? Clara stopped her. Why are you being so good to me? You do not even know me. Eleanor's smile was both warm and sorrowful. 30 years ago, I was on a wagon train when Comanche raiders hit us. My father was killed, and they took me. 3 days later, a young Texas Ranger named Thomas Harper tracked them down. He fought his way into their camp and carried me out in the dead of night. She gently touched Clara's hand. I was broken. I was so ashamed, and thought my life was over. But Thomas saw something more in me. He gave me a chance to heal, to build a new life. So how could I offer you anything less? Clara was too choked up to say a word. Eleanor gave her hand a little squeeze and then quietly left. Alone, Clara went to the window and looked out at the moonlit desert. Somewhere out in that silver and shadow was the little shack where she had started to heal. And somewhere in this very house was Luke, probably thinking She slept soundly that night, free from nightmares for the first time in weeks. The ride to Red Creek was 3 hours long. Luke rode just ahead of her, his rifle resting on his saddle, his eyes scanning every rock and shadow. They didn't talk much. He was focused on keeping her safe, and she was steeling herself for what was to come. Red Creek wasn't much more than a wide spot in the road with a general store, a saloon, and a courthouse. At the very end of the street was the sheriff's office. Sheriff Monroe was a weathered man with tired eyes that had seen it all. He greeted them and led them inside, where the Madison couple was already waiting. "Miss Winslow," Mrs. Madison said, her face flooding with relief. "Oh, my dear child, we were so afraid you were gone. You just took off, and we couldn't find you anywhere. We searched high and low, but there was nothing but sand for miles." Her voice cracked with the memory. Clara pulled her into a hug, feeling Mrs. Madison's whole body shake. "I am all right, Mrs. Madison. That is what counts. Thanks to this young man, from what I understand." Mr. Madison offered his hand to Luke. "I am James Madison, and this is my wife Elizabeth. We owe you a great deal, son." Luke gave his hand a quick, firm shake. "Luke Maddox. And you do not owe me a thing. I just did what any decent person would do." "Not just anyone," Sheriff Monroe corrected him. "Most folks see buzzards circling and ride the other way. You went toward them. You saved her life, Maddox. That means something." Giving their statements took the better part of the afternoon. Sheriff Monroe was meticulous, asking about things Clara had tried to put out of her mind. The Madisons confirmed her story, filling in the gaps. "The one with the scar did all the talking," Mr. Madison recalled. "He was clearly the one in charge." "Did they use any names?" Monroe asked. Elizabeth shook her head. "Not that we heard. They were smart about that." Clara closed her eyes, trying to bring the scene back. "Hold on. When they were arguing, the youngest one said something like, 'Scat is going to be angry we took so long.' The scarred one told him to shut his mouth." Monroe wrote it down, his gaze sharpening. "Scat. Now that is something to go on. I will send a wire to the marshal. Tucson. See if anyone's heard that name." He glanced at Clara. "You certain about that?" "Yes. I remember thinking it was a strange name for a man." The questions kept coming. By the time Monroe finally finished, Clara felt wrung clean out, a kind of tired that went straight to the bone. "You did good," Luke said quietly as they walked into the bright sun. "I know that was hard on you. It had to be done." Clara took a long breath to steady her nerves. "They have to answer for what they did. And they will." Luke's voice was as solid as an oak tree. "Monroe is good at his job. He won't let them slip through his fingers." They were making their way to the horses when a woman called out, "Pardon me, Miss Winslow." Clara turned and saw a small woman, maybe in her 40s, walking toward them. She wore a simple brown dress and carried a leather bag that meant business. "My name is Margaret Hriss," the woman said, holding out her hand. "I run the school here in Red Creek. We've been waiting on you for weeks. After the stage was robbed and you went missing, we all feared the worst. The teaching job." Clara's heart gave a jump. She had almost forgotten about it in the middle of everything else. "Mrs. Harris, I am afraid there has been a problem. The men who robbed us took everything I have. My papers, my letters, all the proof of who I am. I have nothing left to show you." Margaret just waved her hand, dismissing the thought. "Honey, you survived a robbery and worse. Your papers are the last thing I am worried about right now. Are you well enough to teach? That is all that matters to me. Yes, I believe I am. But I do not have a cent to my name for food or clothes until I get paid." "We will figure it out," Margaret said firmly. "The schoolhouse has a small apartment attached. It is nothing fancy, but it is clean, and it is all yours. As for everything else, the church keeps a fund for times like these. We take care of our own in Red Creek, Miss Winslow, and a teacher is one of our own." Clara felt the sting of tears again. "You would do that for me, and you do not even know if I am telling the truth." Margaret smiled. "The Harpers vouch for you. That is all the reference I will ever need. Thomas Harper has no patience for fools, and his wife does not suffer liars. If they say you are a Boston school teacher, then that is who you are." She took some papers from her bag. "Now, if you are up to it, I would like to show you the school. Classes are starting in 2 weeks. Can you be ready?" Clara looked over at Luke. He gave a slow, encouraging nod. "Yes," she said, turning back to Margaret. "Yes, I can be ready." "Wonderful. Come on, then." Luke put his arm out, gently stopping Clara. "I will come with you too. Until we are sure there are not any more of those bandits around, you will not go anywhere without protection." Margaret's eyes darted between them, taking in the scene. She saw the protectiveness in his voice and the way Clara moved a little closer to him, but she just smiled. Of course, the more the merrier. The school was just one large room with windows on three sides, letting in all the light. The benches and desks were in all states of repair, and the blackboard had seen better days. But it was a solid, clean building. The apartment attached, while tiny, had everything Clara could need: a bed, a stove, a table, and shelves for her books. "It is perfect," Clara whispered. She could already see herself here, building a new life. Margaret was beaming. "I am so glad you think so. We have about 25 students from ages 6 to 15. They are good kids for the most part, though a few of the older boys can get a little rowdy." She gave Clara a list of names. "These will be your students." Luke wandered the room while they spoke, running his hand over the old wooden desks. When his back was to them, Margaret leaned in close to Clara. "That man looks at you like you hung the moon and the stars, honey," she whispered. Clara's cheeks burned hot. It is complicated." "The best things in life usually are," Margaret said. She raised her voice. "Mr. Maddox, what do you think of our little school?" Luke turned around, a thoughtful look on his face. "It is a fine place. Have you ever been wronged so badly you had to leave everything behind?" That was Clara Winslow, a woman looking for a fresh start in the dusty town of Red Creek. This is a story about how courage is not about being fearless, but about taking a chance on a new life, and maybe even a new love when you're terrified. If you have ever felt that fear, this story is for you. Margaret nodded, satisfied. "You will do well here, Clara. I have no doubt." After Margaret left, Luke looked at Clara in the quiet schoolhouse. "So you are really going to teach here?" "It is what I came for," Clara said, looking out at the new town that was now her home. "Luke, what is this between us?" He met her gaze, his own full of hope and uncertainty. "I do not want it to end just because I'm going back to the ranch." "The ranch is 20 miles away," Clara said softly. "It might as well be 100 if neither of us is willing to cross it. So make the effort, Luke." "Are you asking me to court you, Miss Winslow?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Because I need to be certain." "Yes," Clara said, her heart hammering in her chest. "That is what I am asking. I am asking you to try, to risk caring again. I am going to risk it too, and I would rather not do it alone." Luke stared for a moment. Then a real wide smile broke across his face. "All right then," he said. "I will come on Saturdays. We can walk and talk." "I am willing," she whispered. He reached out, tucking a stray piece of hair behind her ear. "Then we will try together." He leaned in and kissed her, soft and careful. It was a promise of more to come, of a future neither had dared to imagine just a week ago. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to mess this up," he warned. "I will say the wrong thing or forget how to be a gentleman." Clara gave a shaky laugh. "And I will overthink everything. So we will both be disasters," she said. "Complete disasters," Clara agreed. "But we will be disasters together." She kissed him again, quick and fierce. Together. But the first Saturday, Luke did not come. Clara told herself it was work on the ranch. The second Saturday, she made more excuses for him. A man with his duties has 100 things that can go wrong. By the third Saturday, as the sun set with no sign of him, a terrible thought took hold. She feared their kiss in the schoolhouse was not a promise but a goodbye. She was trying to grade papers when a knock came at the door. Her heart soared, then sank. When she opened the door, it was Margaret, not Luke. "Oh dear," Margaret said, seeing the look on Clara's face. "Still no word from your cowboy." "He is not my cowboy, and I am fine," Clara insisted. Margaret sat down, her expression kind. Clara, I know what it looks like when a woman has been waiting for a man who does not show. Do you know why he has not come? He changed his mind, Clara said, her voice small. Or have you considered that maybe he is scared? Margaret had become a true friend in Red Creek, someone who understood without needing every detail. Scared of what? Of caring again. Of losing someone again, Margaret explained. Thomas Harper was by the school. He says Luke has been working himself to the bone, taking every dangerous job to outrun his own thoughts. Clara sank into her chair. So he is avoiding me, Clara stated. Maybe, Margaret said gently. Or maybe he's trying to convince himself he does not deserve a second chance at happiness. Men who have lost everything find it hard to believe good things can happen again. She stood to leave. You have a choice. You can let fear make your decisions, or you can fight for something that might make you truly happy. After Margaret left, Clara sat in the dark. Fear had driven her from Boston and led her here. It had brought her this new life, but it had also brought her to Luke. And she realized that maybe, just maybe, he was worth fighting for. Monday morning, the schoolhouse exploded with the noise of 25 children. Clara had taught before, but she had never met students like these. They were ranch kids and town kids, all of them tough, smart, and watching this new Eastern teacher with sharp, skeptical eyes, and looked like he knew more about cattle than classrooms. A boy, maybe 13 years old, stood with his arms crossed. He had a look on his face that dared her to try something. He said, "My pa says teachers from Boston do not know a thing about real life. He bets you cannot even ride a horse." Clara looked right at him. "Your pa is about half right. I cannot rope a calf or shoe a horse. I probably cannot do half the things you learned before you could even walk. But I can teach you to read great stories. I can teach you how to figure out money matters and write a proper letter. A letter that will get you a good job." She let that sink in. "So the choice is yours. Do you want to learn? Or do you want to stay stubborn because your pa distrusts folks from the East?" The boy, whose name was Billy Kramer, looked a little surprised. Clara made him a deal. She asked for 2 weeks to prove her worth. If she failed, he could tell his pa he was right all along. Billy thought about it and then agreed. By the end of that first day, she had earned the grudging respect of most of the students. She knew their names, who learned fast, and who needed a little more help. She remembered that teaching was her true calling. It was the one thing that made her feel complete. But as she headed back to her small apartment that evening, tired but content, she could not stop herself. Her eyes scanned the dusty street for a tall man on a paint horse. Her heart sank when all she saw were the usual wagons and townsfolk. Life soon found a steady rhythm. Clara taught her classes and came to know the families of Red Creek. The town was smaller and rougher than Boston, but it had a warmth she did not expect. Neighbors brought her fresh vegetables. Mothers thanked her for teaching their daughters alongside their sons. She was building a life here, one that was all her own. It should have been enough to make her happy. But every Saturday morning, a little bit of hope woke up with her. And every Saturday night, she went to sleep feeling like she had been forgotten all over again. 3 weeks after school began, Clara was walking home from the store when she heard a horse behind her. She turned, expecting a rancher or a supply wagon. But it was Luke. He just sat there on his horse, Dancer, looking dusty and worn out. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. All the things Clara had planned to say just vanished. Luke swung down from his horse and walked toward her. "Clara." "Luke," she said, her voice sharp with hurt. "What a surprise. I had almost forgotten what you looked like." He winced. "I deserve that." "You deserve worse," she said, the tears starting to build. "You promised you would come on Saturdays. You said we would try. Was any of that true? Or was I just another person you had to rescue before moving on?" "It was real." Luke's voice was heavy with pain. "It is real. That is the problem." "How is that a problem?" He struggled for words. "Can we go somewhere private? I do not want to talk about this in the middle of the street. Clara wanted to say no, to make him feel the pain she had been feeling. But the look on his face, the slight tremble in his hands, told her something was deeply wrong. "The schoolhouse," she said. "It is empty." They walked in silence. Inside, with the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, the air felt thick with things unsaid. "Talk," Clara said, putting her parcels down. "Tell me why you stayed away for a month." Luke twisted his hat in his hands. "The nightmares. They came back after I left you here." "They were worse than before," he continued. "I dreamed of Sarah, the baby, but it was all mixed up with you. You were the one buried in the sand. You were dying because I was too slow." His voice broke. "I could not sleep. I could not eat. My brother Thomas sent me out to the line shacks to work it off, but it only got worse." Clara's anger started to melt away, replaced by concern. "Why did you not tell me?" "And do what?" he asked with a bitter laugh. "Burden you with my problems? You are building a new life here, Clara. The last thing you need is a man who wakes up screaming in the night." "That is not your choice to make," she said, her voice fierce. "You do not get to decide what I can handle. I survived 3 days buried alive, Luke. I think I can handle a man's bad dreams." "It is more than just nightmares," he said, meeting her eyes. "I am scared, Clara. I am terrified that if I let myself love you, losing you would break what is left of me. The desert almost took you once. What if I am not there the next time?" She stepped close and took his face in her hands. "Stop. You cannot control what might happen. You can only choose to truly live or to just get by." "I do not know how to do anything but survive," he whispered. "Then learn with me," she said softly, "because I am scared too, but I am choosing to take a chance on being happy, even if it might not last. Please, Luke, choose it with me." For a second, he just stood there. Then he was kissing her, a desperate and powerful kiss, his hands tangled in her hair. He held her like she might vanish. Clara kissed him back, pouring all her loneliness and hope into that moment. When they finally pulled apart for air, he rested his forehead on hers. "I am so sorry I stayed away." "Do not do it again," she said, her voice unsteady. "If you are hurting, you tell me. If you are scared, you tell me. But do not just disappear." "Okay," Luke breathed. "Okay. I promise." They stood there holding each other as the afternoon sun filled the room with golden light. Outside, the town of Red Creek went on with its day. But inside, 2 survivors had found the courage to hope for something more. "Stay for dinner," Clara said at last. "I am a terrible cook, but you will eat it anyway." "Good." Luke let out a laugh, a bit rusty but genuine. "Sounds just about perfect." The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. Luke showed up every Saturday, sure as the sunrise, and wouldn't head back to his ranch till dusk. They'd stroll through Red Creek, share a meal at the hotel, and sit on Clara's little porch. She'd grade papers while he read from whatever book her students were studying. A small town's got eyes, and Red Creek was no different. Mrs. Chen over at the general store gave Clara a knowing smile when she bought fabric for a new dress. Even Reverend Walsh made some pointed remarks about proper courtships. The gossip wore on her. She'd left Boston to get away from all the whispers, and here they were again, just with a Texas drawl. "Just let 'em talk," Luke said one afternoon down by the creek. "Folks will always have something to say. Doesn't mean we're obligated to listen." "Easy for you to say. You're not the woman from Boston with a bad reputation." Luke's jaw set hard. "Anyone says that where I can hear 'em, they'll be sorry for it. That's the last thing I need, Luke, you fighting my battles. I can handle a little talk." Clara tossed a small stone into the water. "But it makes a person wonder if they can ever truly leave the past behind." "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Luke gently turned her face to his. I see the toughest woman I've ever known. Someone who walked through fire and came out stronger. Someone who teaches kids with a patience I can't fathom. And who reads poetry like it's the most important thing in the world. He cracked a smile. I don't see your past, Clara. I just see you. That's when she kissed him. A soft kiss that tasted like creek water and hope. I love you, she whispered. It scares me to death, but I do. Luke went completely still. I love you too, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Reckon I have since the day I pulled you out of that desert. Just took me this long to say it. They stayed there a while, just holding hands and watching the sun paint the sky. The letter from Boston showed up on a Tuesday. Margaret, another teacher, brought it into the schoolhouse during an arithmetic lesson. Her face was a perfect blank slate. This is for you, she said, handing over the envelope with its official letterhead. Looks mighty important. Clara's hands trembled as she took it. The return address was from the Boston Public Schools. This was it, the official proof of her teaching credentials she'd been waiting for. Class is dismissed early today, she heard herself say. Your reading assignment is pages 40 to 60. The children scattered like birds while Clara just stared at the envelope. After Margaret left, she sat down and opened it. Inside were her official papers, all stamped and signed, and a letter from the superintendent. She had to read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. It said her certification was valid, but it also said her old boss, a Mr. James Whitmore, had filed a formal complaint against her. He claimed she had behaved unprofessionally with moral turpitude, a phrase designed to ruin a teacher. The letter explained that while the claims didn't cancel her certificate, they had to be included with any official verification sent to a new job. It also noted that she had resigned under a cloud of suspicion. The paper fluttered from her numb fingers. After all she'd been through, the man who'd lied to her and left her in ruins was still trying to tear her down from 1,000 miles away, and he was about to succeed. When the school board here made her position permanent, they'd get this letter. They'd read those words, and Clara would lose everything all over again. She was still sitting there in a daze when Luke walked in. He wasn't due till Saturday, but one look at her face was all it took. What is it? What's happened? She just handed him the letter. She watched his expression change from puzzled to pure, cold anger. That son of a... Luke cut himself off, his voice tight. Clara, this is nothing but lies. He's just trying to save his own skin. Is it, though? Her laugh was hollow. I was foolish, and I trusted him. Maybe my character is questionable. Don't you dare say that. Luke knelt in front of her, taking her hands. You were young, and he took advantage of you. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. The school board won't see it like that when Margaret sends for that paperwork. Clara's voice cracked. I'll lose this job, Luke. Then we fight, he said, his voice firm. You write your side of it. We don't just roll over. It's my word against the respected principles. I know how that story ends. So you're just going to give up? Let that man win? I'm being realistic, Luke. Maybe I was a fool to think I could ever really start over. Now you listen to me. He stood and gently turned her to face him. You survived being left for dead in the desert. You built a life here from scratch. These children love you. This town respects you. His voice softened. And you have me. You are not alone in this. We will figure it out. Together. Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd trusted promises before. What if together isn't enough? She whispered. He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But right now, we have time, and we have each other. That's a damn sight better than nothing. She leaned into him, breathing in the familiar smell of leather and sage. That was just Luke. He was right. It wasn't nothing. but she still wondered if it would be enough. The circuit judge, Cornelius Hammond, rode into Red Creek 2 weeks later. He was a man with sharp eyes and a reputation for being fair. He was here for the trial of the bandits who'd robbed her stagecoach. Sheriff Monroe came to the schoolhouse to let her know the trial would start the next morning. "You'll have to tell your story again," he said, holding his hat. "I know it's hard, but the judge needs to hear it from you." Clara's stomach twisted into a knot, but she nodded. "I'll be there." "Luke Maddox is already in town," the sheriff added. "Rode in this morning. He said he wasn't about to let you go through this by yourself." After the sheriff left, Clara watched the street fill up with folks. A trial was big news, and this one was set to be a spectacle. Clara heard a voice beside her and nearly jumped out of her skin. It was Margaret. "You ought to go on home and get ready for tomorrow. I can handle the afternoon lessons." Clara shook her head. "I need to keep my hands busy." Margaret's tone was kind but firm. "Clara, you are about to face the worst day of your life all over again. You need your rest more than those children need their arithmetic." Clara knew she was right. She sent the school kids home early, trying to ignore their curious looks and hushed questions about the big trial. On her walk home, she saw Luke waiting on her porch. His horse, Dancer, was tied to the rail, and his tall frame was slumped in a chair. He stood up the second he saw her. Clara said nothing. She just walked right into his arms. "I got you," he whispered into her hair. "I am right here." Inside, Luke made coffee while Clara changed her dress. When she came back, he had laid out some bread and cheese from his saddlebags. It was a simple meal, but the thought of eating felt impossible. "You need to get something in you," Luke said, reading her mind. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day. You will need your strength." She choked down a few bites and washed them down with Luke's awful coffee, which was somehow even worse than her own. But the simple act of sharing a meal calmed her down. It was a reminder that life would go on after the trial. "What if I get up there and just fall apart?" she asked. "What if I cannot get through it?" "Then you fall apart, and we will be there to put you back together." Luke reached over and took her hand. "Clara, you are a whole lot stronger than you give yourself credit for. You have already lived through the worst thing they could ever do to you. Telling the story is not near as hard as living it." "It sure does not feel that way," she said. "I know." He drew little circles on her palm with his thumb. "But you are not walking this road alone this time. The Madisons will be there. I will be there. The sheriff and the judge, they all want to see justice done." Clara wanted so badly to believe him. She wanted to believe that the wicked get punished and the good folks get peace. But her faith had been broken back in Boston, where a powerful man's lies had ruined her name while he walked free. "What about that letter from Boston?" she asked. "What if the school board asks Margaret to check on my story?" "Margaret is a smart woman," Luke said. "She will wait until this trial is over. She knows you have enough on your plate right now." Luke gave her hand a squeeze. "One fire at a time, Clara. We will get through tomorrow, and then we will deal with Boston." They passed the evening quietly. Luke read to her from one of her books while she pretended to look over school papers. As the sun went down and the trial felt closer, Luke made no move to leave. "You should head back to the ranch," Clara told him, even though she wanted him to stay. "It is a long, dark ride. I got a room at the hotel tonight." He put down his book and looked her square in the eye. "I am not leaving you by yourself tonight, Clara. Not when you are this scared. I never said I was scared. You did not have to." Luke stood up and pulled her out of her chair and into his arms. "It is okay to be scared. And it is okay to need somebody. You do not have to be strong every single minute of the day." Clara finally let herself lean on him, and the tears she had been fighting all day started to fall. Luke just held her, stroking her hair and whispering soft words of comfort. When she finally stopped crying, feeling embarrassed, Luke just smiled and wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Better?" he asked. "A little." She took a deep, shaky breath. "Thank you for being here, for not thinking I am weak." "Clara, tears do not make you weak. It took me 2 years after my Sarah died before I could shed a tear. When it finally happened, I cried for 3 days straight. My brother Thomas found me a complete mess. And you know what he did? He sat down, handed me a bottle of whiskey, and said, "Sometimes the only way out is through." And he stayed right there until I had no more tears left to cry. Luke's voice was thick with the memory. My point is, letting yourself feel things does not make you weak. It makes you human. And I would much rather have the real, human you than someone hiding behind walls. Clara kissed him then. It was a soft, grateful kiss for the man who saw right through her defenses. He rested his forehead against hers. "Get some sleep," he said. "I will be here in the morning to walk with you to the courthouse." "Promise?" "Promise." Later that night, Clara lay awake, thinking about justice, and whether truth was ever strong enough to beat a powerful lie. Sleep finally took her, but it was filled with nightmares of sand and buzzards, and 3 men who refused to stay in the past. The courthouse was packed to the gills. Every seat was taken, and folks were standing along the walls and crowding the doorway. Clara sat up front with Luke on one side and the Madisons on the other. Judge Hammond came in right at 9 o'clock. He looked to be about 70 with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This court is now in session," he announced. "The Territory versus Jacob Stein, William Dockery, and Charles Pierce. The charges are robbery, attempted murder, and 3 counts of murder. How do the defendants plead?" The 3 men stood in their chains. Their lawyer, a tired man from Tucson, answered for them. "Not guilty, Your Honor. We claim we are innocent of all charges." The next few hours were filled with testimony. Sheriff Monroe presented the evidence from the abandoned stagecoach to the stolen goods found at the bandits' camp. The Madisons told their story of the robbery, their voices shaking as they remembered the terror of it all. Then it was Clara's turn. Her legs felt like jelly as she walked to the witness stand. The prosecutor, a young man named Davies, was gentle with her. "Miss Winslow," he began, "can you tell the court what happened on the day of the robbery?" Clara's throat was bone dry. She took a sip of water and started her story. She told them everything, from her nervousness about her new teaching job to the moment the masked bandits showed up with their guns drawn. She described the crash after they shot the horses and how the bandits stole everything of value. "They came for me last," Clara said, her voice finding its strength. "The one with the scar, Jacob Stein." He grabbed the locket from around my neck. "It was my mother's. It was the only thing I had left of her." She touched her throat. I tried to pull away from him. That is when he hit me with his pistol. "What is the next thing you remember, Miss Winslow?" I woke up buried in the sand up to my neck. The sun was beating down on me. I could hear buzzards circling overhead. Clara's hands began to tremble. I tried to dig myself out, but I could not move. So I just laid there, waiting to die. The whole courtroom went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "How long were you there?" Davies asked. 3 days, maybe 4. I lost track of time. It was burning hot during the day and freezing cold at night. I was so thirsty I started seeing things. There were times I just wanted to close my eyes and let it all be over. She found Luke's face in the crowd and drew strength from his gaze. But I did not give up. I survived. And then Luke Maddox found me. "Thank you, Miss Winslow," Davies said. "Now I need you to look at those 3 men. Can you tell the court if any of them were the ones who robbed you?" Clara made herself look right at them. Jacob Stein glared back at her with pure hate. William Dockery stared at the floor. Charles Pierce just looked like a scared kid. "Yes," Clara said, her voice ringing clear as a bell. "All 3 of them were there." "Are you certain?" "Absolutely certain. I would know them anywhere." The defense lawyer stood up. He tried to poke holes in her story, asking how she could be so sure when their faces were covered. He suggested her memory was clouded by fear, but Clara did not back down one bit. "I saw their eyes," she said. "I heard their voices, and their voices." She remembered the scar on Jacob Stein's face, clear as day. William Dockery always favored his left leg when he stood, and Charles Pierce had a slight stutter. I remember everything, But you were hit on the head, the lawyer pressed. You lost consciousness. Is it not possible your memory is confused? That you are blaming these men simply because you need someone to blame? Clara leaned forward, her voice like steel. Sir, for 3 months I have tried to forget those faces. I have tried to stop seeing them in my dreams. I am absolutely certain these are the men who left me to die. The defense attorney had no more questions. The judge looked at Clara with a new kind of respect as she returned to her seat. Luke put his arm around her, a solid, comforting presence. The trial went on. The bandit's lawyer tried to claim it was a case of mistaken identity. He said his clients were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the evidence against them was too strong, especially with the stolen goods found in their possession. The Madison story fit exactly what Clara described. But the thing that sealed their fate was Sheriff Monroe catching them at that line shack, fixing to silence Clara for good. That was all the proof anyone needed. The judge called it a day, with closing arguments set for the morning. Clara walked out of that courthouse in a fog, barely feeling the hands that touched her arm or hearing the voices of support. Luke put a hand on her back and cleared a path through the crowd. When they were finally alone, he said, "You did real good in there, Clara. You were strong and you didn't let him rattle you. I need to sit down." They found a bench, and that's when Clara's strength gave out. She bent over, fighting back the sickness rising in her throat. "The hard part's over," Luke said softly, rubbing her back. "It'll all be done tomorrow." "Will it?" she asked, her eyes wet. "They left me to die in the desert, Luke. I have to live with that forever." "How is that ever done?" Luke didn't have an answer. He just held her as the sun went down over Red Creek. The jury didn't even take an hour the next morning. Guilty, all 3 of them. Judge Hammond sentenced Sten and Dockery to hang right away, but gave Pierce a little more thought, considering his age. Clara just sat there, hands in her lap, feeling hollowed out. There was no joy, no relief, just a big empty space. Afterward, Thomas Harper found them outside. "Clara, I want you to know the barbed cross has your back. If you need anything at all, you just say the word." "Thank you, Mr. Harper," she said, her own voice sounding far away. His wife, Eleanor, came up beside him, her face full of worry. "Child, you look like you're about to fall over. Come out to the ranch with us for a few days. Get away from all this talk and just rest." "But I have the school," Clara protested. "Margaret can handle it," Eleanor said, not taking no for an answer. "You need time to heal." Clara looked at Luke, and he nodded. "Might do you some good." So she packed a small bag and rode out with them, watching the town shrink behind her. For the first time, she felt something close to relief. The ranch was peaceful. Eleanor put Clara in the guest room, brought her some tea, and then blessedly left her alone. Clara slept for 14 hours straight and woke up feeling almost safe for the first time in months. Luke found her on the porch later that afternoon. She was just staring out at the desert that had nearly been her grave. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I don't know," she answered. "Just numb." "I reckon that's normal," he said. "The trial's over. They'll hang, and that'll be that. But are you really okay, Clara?" She thought about it for a good long while. She'd survived, built a new life, and even found love. But she also had a past that wouldn't stay buried, and scars that would never fade. "No," she said finally. "I'm not okay, but I think I will be someday. And right now that's enough." Luke took her hand. "What about that letter from Boston? What are you going to do?" Clara took a deep breath. "I'm going to write back and tell my side of things. Then I'm going to let Margaret send for the official records. If the school board fires me, at least it'll be over the truth. I'm done running, Luke." "That's either brave or foolish. Can't decide which," he said, a small smile on his face. "I learned I'm stronger than I ever knew out in that desert," she said, squeezing his hand. "Whatever happens, I'll handle it." Luke looked at her for a long moment. then stood up and pulled her into his arms. "Marry me," he said. Clara's heart just stopped. "What?" "Marry me," he said again, his voice sure and steady. "Not 'cause you need saving, but because I love you. When I think about my future, you're the only thing I see in it. Luke, I could lose my job. I might have to leave this town. Then we'll go somewhere else. I can find work anywhere, Clara." His voice cracked just a little. "But I can't picture doing any of it without you." This was all happening so fast. It had been less than 6 months. They both had scars. But waiting for the perfect time was just another way of giving up. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promises. When they came up for air, he rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure out the rest as we go. Together." "Together," she agreed. They stood there on the porch while the sun turned the whole desert to gold. Inside, Eleanor Harper watched them and smiled. She remembered a similar proposal on that very same porch 30 years ago. Some stories have a way of coming around again, she thought. Over dinner, they told the Harpers, Thomas offered Luke the ranch manager job, complete with a house. Eleanor started planning the wedding right then and there. "Something small and simple," Clara insisted. "Of course, dear," Eleanor said, though her eyes twinkled with bigger ideas. Later that night, they sat on the porch, looking up at a sky full of stars. "You scared?" Luke asked. "Terrified," Clara admitted, "but happy too. Is it strange to be both?" "No," he said, pulling her close. "I think that's just called living." They sat there for a long while, not saying a word, just knowing they'd face whatever was coming next together. The trial was done. The bandits were going to hang. And whether she kept her job or not, Clara knew she wouldn't be alone. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she felt like she had a future to look forward to. The letter to the Boston School Board took her 3 whole days to write. She kept starting over, trying to find the right words, until finally Luke sat down with her. "Stop trying to explain it to him," Luke said. "Just tell it straight. The truth don't need fancy clothes." So Clara wrote it all down, plain as day. She laid out how James Whitmore had chased after her, how his promises had sounded true as rain. She confessed she'd believed him when he swore he was leaving his wife. She owned her part of the mistake, but refused to carry the weight for a tangle that took 2 to make. She described the whispers and the cold shoulders, how Whitmore kept his good name while she was forced to pack her bags. She ended her letter with a simple, solid fact. She had stumbled, but she had learned, and she'd be darned if one mistake would chart the course of her whole life. "That'll do," Luke said after he read it. "That's honest." "It's terrifying," Clara answered, but she sealed the envelope all the same. Margaret took it to be mailed. Then all they could do was wait. Planning the wedding was a welcome chore. Eleanor Harper took charge like a general on a campaign, turning Clara's small ceremony into a full-blown frontier celebration. The guest list swelled from a few friends to nearly 50 people. "Eleanor is having the time of her life," Thomas remarked one evening, watching his wife arrange flowers. "We never had children, you see. I reckon she's been storing up wedding plans for 30 years, just waiting for the right folks." Clara felt a rush of affection for the woman who'd opened her home and her heart. "I truly don't mind. It's nice to have someone care so much." "She sees herself in you," Thomas said quietly. "A woman given a second chance at happiness after a great trauma. She wants to give you the celebration she never had. We married quick and quiet, just us and a judge, on account of she was still recovering." Understanding washed over Clara. "Then we'll have whatever celebration she wants." The dress Eleanor made was beautiful. Simple cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery. It was practical enough for a life out here, but special enough for a bride. When Clara put it on for the last fitting, Eleanor's eyes misted over. "You look lovely, dear. You look lovely." Luke is going to forget how to breathe. Clara stared in the mirror, hardly knowing the woman she saw. The scars had faded to faint pink marks. She looked healthy, settled, almost peaceful. "I never thought I would get married," she admitted. "After Boston, I figured that part of my life was over." "Life has a way of surprising us," Eleanor said, adjusting the hem. "I thought the same thing once." The wedding was set for 2 weeks after they dealt with those bandits. Clara couldn't stomach watching the hanging, but Luke had gone. He came back quiet, with a hard set to his jaw, and just said, "It is done." 4 days before they were to be married, a letter came all the way from Boston. Margaret brought it to the schoolhouse, her face giving nothing away. "This came on the morning stage," she said. "I figured you might want some privacy for this one." Clara's hands shook, taking that envelope. Her entire future was sitting right there in her palm. Margaret offered to stay, but Clara shook her head. "No, thank you. This is something I have to do on my own." After she left, Clara sat at her desk with numb fingers and tore it open. Inside were 2 different letters. She took a deep breath and started reading the one from the superintendent, the one about Mr. Whitmore. The letter laid it all out. They had looked into Mr. Whitmore, and sure enough, Clara was not the first teacher he had tormented. 2 other women had spoken up since she left. The school had fired the man, and he was now facing formal charges. Best of all, her teaching certificate was cleared, good as new. They even included a letter of recommendation that wiped the slate clean of that whole sorry affair. Clara had to read it 3 times for it to sink in. The second letter was from one of those women, a teacher named Anne Sullivan. She told her own story about Whitmore from 2 years prior. Anne wrote that Clara's courage had given her the strength to finally step forward. "You saved me," her letter said. "You saved all of us who were too scared to speak up. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth." In the quiet of that empty classroom, Clara finally cried. Not from sadness, but from a relief so deep it almost hurt. Telling the truth had mattered. When she finally collected herself, she found Margaret waiting on the porch. "Well, good news or bad?" Clara just handed her the letters. A huge grin spread across Margaret's face as she read, "Oh, Clara, my dear, this is just wonderful." "So the school board will approve my position?" Clara asked, holding her breath. Margaret laughed a little. "Honey, they already voted to keep you on for good. After your testimony, this whole town thinks you hung the moon. You were never in any real danger of losing this job." A weight Clara had been carrying for so long finally lifted. She had her good name, a town that stood by her, and the love of a good man. "I have to find Luke," she said. "Go on then," Margaret urged her. "I will send the children home early. This news is worth celebrating." Clara borrowed Margaret's horse and rode for the ranch like her life depended on it. She found Luke in the barn repairing some tack and flew right into his arms. "Whoa, steady there," he laughed, catching her. "What has gotten into you?" The whole story came tumbling out of her, one word tripping over the next. Luke's smile grew wider as he listened. "So they actually fired that fella?" he asked. "Fired him, and he is facing charges," she said, pulling his face down for a kiss. And Margaret said, "The board already voted to keep me permanently." "I never had a doubt," he said. But she could see the last bit of tension leave his shoulders. "I am just glad that scoundrel is finally getting what he has coming to him." They held each other for a long moment in the dusty quiet. "3 more days," Luke murmured into her ear. "3 more days until you are my wife." The wedding day dawned perfect and clear. The kind of Arizona morning that makes you fall in love with the high desert. Clara woke up in the Harpers' guest room to find Eleanor bustling in with a breakfast tray. "The bride is not going to her wedding hungry," Eleanor announced with a smile. The ceremony was planned for 2 o'clock that afternoon. Clara was a bundle of nerves as Eleanor helped her with her hair and the lovely cream dress. "There now," Eleanor said, stepping back. "You look perfect." A little while later, Margaret arrived with a small bunch of wildflowers. "Something to carry," she said softly. "They are not fancy." "They are perfect," Clara whispered, taking them. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything." Margaret's eyes started to water. "Oh, now you have done it. I promised I would not cry. You have earned every bit of this happiness, Clara." Downstairs, Thomas was waiting to walk her out to the ceremony. They had set chairs in the yard under a giant cottonwood tree. "Are you ready?" Thomas asked, offering his arm. "Yes," Clara said, and she meant it with her whole heart. As they walked around the side of the house, she saw them all. All the chairs were filled with friendly faces. Her students were there with their parents and folks she knew from town. The sheriff stood off to one side, looking a bit uncomfortable in a suit. And at the front, waiting under the big tree, was Luke. He was wearing a new dark blue shirt and his hair was neatly combed. But it was the look on his face that made Clara's heart stop. He looked at her as if she were the only person in the entire world. A fiddle started to play as Thomas walked her down the aisle. He placed her hand in Luke's and stepped back. "Take care of her," Thomas said, just for Luke to hear. "I know," Luke answered, his eyes never leaving hers. Clara barely heard the Reverend's words. She was focused on Luke's warm, strong hands holding hers. She saw his gentle smile when she stumbled on her vows, and felt the cool surprise of a simple gold band on her finger. Then he leaned close and whispered, "I love you," so quietly that only she could hear. "You can kiss your bride," the Reverend announced, and Luke surely didn't need to be told twice. The kiss was gentle, full of promise for the days to come. When they finally parted, the whole place erupted in cheers. Clara turned to face them, her students whooping and hollering, Margaret dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and the ranch hands whistling loud enough to be heard in the next county. She felt overcome by all the love in that little church. This was her family now. The celebration afterward was pure Texas joy. Long tables were set up with simple good food, and the air was filled with stories and laughter. One of the ranch hands turned out to be a fine fiddle player, and his music filled the afternoon. Then Billy Kramer, the very boy who'd given her so much trouble on her first day, stood up. He made a speech about how Miss Winslow was the best teacher they ever had, and that Mr. Maddox had better treat her right, or he'd have to answer to them. Luke just smiled, shook the boy's hand seriously, and promised he would. As the sun began to dip low, Luke led Clara away from the party. They walked toward the pasture where horses grazed in the golden light. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft. "Impossibly happy," Clara admitted. "So happy I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." Luke wrapped his arms around her from behind. "We've had our share of bad luck," he said. "It's our turn to have things go right." They stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky with streaks of orange and purple. The same endless desert that had nearly been the end of Clara had somehow brought her to this perfect moment. "That manager job Thomas offered you," she said, turning in his arms. "Do you want it?" He looked into her eyes. "Only if you want to stay in Red Creek. We can go anywhere you want." "I want to stay," Clara said without a second's hesitation. "I love it here. I'm tired of running, Luke. I'm ready to put down roots." Luke kissed her forehead. "Then we'll take the job," he said, "build our house, and maybe one day fill it with children." The thought of it, of building something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts, made her heart swell. "Yes," she whispered. "I want all of it." The house Thomas built for them was small but perfect. It had 2 rooms to start, with plans to add more later on. It sat on a little rise overlooking the main ranch, close enough to be part of the community, but far enough for some privacy. 2 weeks after the wedding, they moved their few belongings into the empty rooms that would soon become their home. Clara had her books and her teaching supplies. Luke had his saddle, his rifle, and a few volumes of poetry. Together, they started to build a life. Clara's teaching position was now permanent, and her students were thriving. Luke took to his new job as ranch manager like a duck to water. He was fair and hard-working, earning the respect of everyone at the Barbed Cross. The ranch prospered under his care, But their real life took shape in the quiet moments, sharing coffee on the porch in the morning, reading together by lamplight in the evening, or just sitting together, remembering how far they had come. The nightmares that haunted them both began to fade. They learned to comfort each other, to talk through the fears and remind one another that they had survived. 1 year after their wedding, Clara found out she was pregnant. She told Luke one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sun go down. She'd been nervous, worried the news might bring back painful memories of his first wife and the child he'd lost. But Luke's face was transformed by pure joy. He pulled her into a hug, his whole body trembling. "Are you sure?" he whispered. She told him the doctor had confirmed it just yesterday. "I never thought. I didn't dare hope this could happen again," he said, his eyes wet with tears. Clara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "This is our child, Luke," she said gently. "This is a new story." He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face as he let the hope in. "A baby," he said, almost in disbelief. "We're having a baby." And then they were both laughing and crying, overwhelmed by the beautiful, impossible truth of it all. The pregnancy had its challenges, but their little community was there every step of the way. Eleanor was a constant source of wisdom. Margaret helped out at the school, and Luke was endlessly caring. Their son was born on a clear spring morning. The labor was long and hard. For a moment, listening to Clara's cries from behind the bedroom door, Luke thought his heart might stop from fear. But then Eleanor appeared, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Luke," she said. "A healthy, perfect son. And Clara is fine. She's asking for you." Luke stumbled into the room. Clara was propped up on pillows, looking exhausted but absolutely radiant, holding a small bundle in her arms. "Meet your son," she said softly. Luke stepped closer, hardly daring to breathe, and looked down at the tiny, precious life wrapped in blankets. "He's so small," Luke whispered in awe. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months, but had never found the perfect one. Now, holding his son, Luke knew. "James Thomas," he said, "for your father, and for Thomas Harper." Clara's eyes filled with happy tears. "It's perfect." 2 years later, their daughter, Rose, was born. It was the name Luke had chosen for the daughter he had lost, now given a new beginning with the daughter who lived. Rose was a little spitfire from the start, a perfect complement to her quieter older brother. The house grew right along with the family. The ranch was a wonderful place to raise children, surrounded by horses and cattle and people who loved them. Clara even started a small school right there at the barbed cross for the ranch kids. Their life wasn't fancy, but it was full. They had found their home, together. Luke took to being ranch manager like a duck to water. Before long, Thomas made him a partner, and he bought a small share of the barbed cross. The ranch prospered, known all over the territory for its quality cattle and fair dealings. But more than that, they built a good life, rich with love. They had family dinners with the Harpers, holiday parties with all their friends, and quiet evenings reading to their children. Years slipped by. James grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's quiet strength. Rose was a little firecracker, dead set on proving a girl could do anything her brother could do, but better. Then came a third child, a boy they named William, who had his mother's blonde hair. For their 10th anniversary, Luke and Clara rode out to the old line shack where he had first brought her. It was the place she had healed, inside and out. The cabin was still there, used as a shelter for the ranch hands. They sat on the porch where Luke had read poetry to her, where he had fallen in love without quite realizing it. 10 years, Clara said softly. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago, sometimes just like yesterday. "Do you ever regret it?" Luke asked. "Coming west, with everything that happened?" Clara thought on it for a moment. "I regret the pain and the fear, but I could never regret the outcome. I don't regret you, our children, or this life we've built." She turned to him. "Never, not for a single second." Luke pulled her close. I found you dying in the sand. I couldn't believe anyone could survive what you'd been through. And now, look at you, building something beautiful right out of the ashes." "We built it," Clara corrected. "Together." They sat in a comfortable silence, watching the desert they had both learned to call home. The desert that had taken so much, and yet had given them everything. "You know what I think about sometimes," Luke said. "If I had ridden past those buzzards that day, our whole lives, the children, all of this happiness would have never happened." "But you didn't ride past," Clara said firmly. "You chose to look, you chose to act. That choice made all the difference." As they rode home, the setting sun painted the sky in those impossible Arizona colors. Their children were waiting. James was helping with dinner while Rose argued with William about something small. The sounds of family filled the air. Clara stood in the doorway of their home with Luke's arm around her shoulders and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Boston to a stagecoach robbery. From sand and near death to healing and hope. From a woman running from her past to someone who had built a future worth living. "What are you thinking about?" Luke asked. "How lucky we are," Clara said simply. Luke kissed the top of her head. "The buzzards always know first," he said, repeating the words she had heard him say years ago. "They circle death, but sometimes if you're brave enough to ride toward them, you find life waiting there instead." "I'm glad you were brave enough, Luke Maddox," Clara said, turning to kiss him. "I'm glad you were stubborn enough not to die, Clara Maddox." They went inside together, closing the door on the desert night. She had thrived, building a life of purpose and love. She had proven that endings can become beginnings, and that the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures. Every night before she slept, Clara whispered a quiet thank you. A thank you to whatever force had kept her alive in that sand, had guided Luke toward those circling buzzards, and had given them both the courage to try again, when it seemed impossible. Because in the end, that was the real miracle. Not just survival, but the willingness to believe that after the worst, there could still be beauty, still be joy, still be love. And there always was, for those brave enough to reach for it. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.